Tervist.
Tere.
Tervist.
Tere.
Tere.
So, good evening, everyone. My plan is so that at first I try say some very personal remarks about our conference. After that, we are introducing all the participants here in our panel. And the main goal, what we must do, is to talk about the future of polar research and secondly, conclusions of our conference. So I am starting not with the conclusions, but some very personal remarks what I made. Firstly, my name is Kollist. I am educated from Tartu University like a chemist. I was working in Institute of Chemistry, leading research co-worker. After that, I was 10 years Director General of Estonian Migration and Citizens Board, 2 years like rector of Adventist University, and now director of previous academic library. But what belongs now nowadays to Tallinn University. So some keywords, some remarks only. How large are the plants? The plants in Nordic areas are not very large. And the problem is they are interconnected, and of my mind, the plants there must do, they must collaborate. And example there was Peetulanara, Vaevakask, what we know here in Estonia also. We were talking about situation, the global temperature, about permafrost. For me, it was very interesting that to understand technology, if the technology, underwater technology is working in Antarctic or Arctic, it's going to work everywhere. And that long-term data is very important. What is long-term data? That's a question. It's a week, it's a year, it's maybe million years. And there was talk about the energy. Of my mind, it's extra important. We saw the pictures, how to study the meltwater pathways in the Nordic. And the situation is that, of course, if we have ice, there is happening nothing. If the ice is melting, nothing is happening. If there are waves, something more is happening. And my personal remark is that, of my mind, generally there is two most important things, that are people and energy. If the people are clever enough, it's right good. If the people can use energy, it's okay. And on the other hand, if we have too much energy, like it's going to happen in our Earth, it's some other situation, of course. We were talking about how is melting our our ice in the northern part of Earth and also in the southern part. We were talking about how happy are students in Svalbard, and there was also talk about energy. Some buildings were broken, and it's very good example, not good example about that there is something extra happening also there. We have too much energy on the one hand, and on the other hand, too few energy. Interesting was talk about digital twins, how to make simulation and to study not only water movement, but how the ecosystems are moving and how to study them. We were talking about the ocean health, about Finnish research station where were 3 flags, Estonian, France, and American flag. We were talking about sailors whaling and regular situation in the Arctic region, about Cook, about Bellinghausen, and about that seals, krill, whales, and fish, the situation of them are not very bad. But on the other hand, we heard that the situation of languages are not good. We heard that Estonia is a great language, but on the other hand, 1/3 of languages are going to disappear. And of course, we were talking about the situation in Russia and about the languages in Russia, and generally the situation of Nordic people in Russia. It's anybody understand that it's extra problem, of course. We saw a film about Noormets people, and it was live about the brigade number 7. And the question was why these people are not going to live to the cities. And the answer of my mind was very good. They must constantly moving. We saw very interesting pictures about the Bering Strait, how Fridtjof Bering and Captain Cook traveled there, about native life, these people, and finally, suddenly, the idea was that the future of such kind of people is to be guides. The lectures about post-colonialism in Arctic, it's, how to say, it's the same. The future is, they are guides, maybe not so. Let's hope that it's going to turn some better way. And in the first day we had also the round table like today, and it was about the diplomacy. And we were talking about that, what is doing the Russian base on Spitsbergen, how is working the sanctions there, are they making science or something else? We were talking about the rapid changes in climate, but also rapid changes in relations between people, between collaboration and possibilities to collaborate. President Kaljulaid talked about the green turn, about that policymakers are too weak, and the scientists are also too weak. And she said that the people are understanding later, we must do it quickly. And also we talked about international agreements and possibilities to use that thought that President Meri said, that international laws and the international law is atomic weapon for small countries. It's nowadays also so or not, that's the question. It's only some remarks that I wrote here, and let's do it so. Please introduce yourself, and after that, firstly, I plan to give floor for Mr. Paet. He is not common with our event. He is freshly coming, and I know that he's done some work in the EU Parliament, even in the field of Arctic, and I saw he's written about that earlier, 10 years ago or something like that. So let's start, please. Please, yes.
How long time do I have to introduce myself? I'm good at talking about myself, so I could go on for a long time.
You can talk about yourself and you can give some remarks about our conference also. Let's talk so that firstly about our conference now and then about the future.
All in one go.
Okay.
Okay, my name is Riko Noormets. I'm a marine geologist and geophysicist by training. I'm a professor at the University Center in Svalbard, where I've been since 2008. I work a lot with the seafloor mapping and seafloor processes, so I use geophysical methods mostly to map the seafloor, but also sedimentology. And then I use these data to study the modern processes on a seafloor and then the ice-ocean interactions. We work together with, for example, glaciologists and oceanographers. We try to quantify the effect of ocean warming onto the mass loss from the glaciers and ice caps in the Arctic, because these processes are rather poorly represented in a global climate and sea level models. For instance, we do not understand enough the process physics behind these processes. And I also work, for instance, with a marine biologist. We look at the interactions between the geological processes and the biology, for example, on those seafloor methane seeps that we've been studying around Svalbard, but also in other parts of the Arctic. I've been on expeditions to the East Siberian Sea, all the way to Alaska, been to Antarctica. But my main work for the past 15 years is around Svalbard. Shall we continue with the introduction?
Yes.
And then? Okay.
Yeah, let's continue, and then I shall give the floor to Mr. Paet.
All right, so my name is Jonne Kotta, and I'm primarily a scientist. And being a scientist in Estonia, that means I have to be many more things as well. Accounting, media person, public relations, and also things. And then my field is marine ecology, but obviously it's not only marine ecology because we have this social, economy, policy, all these management systems, so we have to look at the sort of having a holistic perspective. And then I'm also an entrepreneur a bit, so, but I try to do it in a way that to improve the sustainability of the businesses. And then I'm sort of like trying to cultivate mussels and seaweeds in Estonia, which sort of, yeah, mission impossible. Well, it's not mission impossible anymore, and with some valorization, because maybe you know, maybe you don't, but the Baltic Sea is very nutrient rich. And if you cultivate mussels and seaweeds, they are extracting nutrients. So we are consuming a problem, and we turn the problem into a solution and benefits. So, yeah, so that's my background.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So my name is Fridtjof Mehlum. I'm a biologist. I did my doctoral thesis on marine ecology in the Arctic areas. I worked for 20 years as a biologist with the Norwegian Polar Institute. After that, I worked in the Research Council of Norway for 8 years. I was heading the climate program there, and I was secretary of the National Committee on Polar Research for 8 years. Later, I went to the Natural History Museum, and I was the research director at the museum in the University of Oslo. So most of my work has been done in the northern areas. I've also worked, did some field work in the Antarctic, and I have been in some working groups. We heard about Kamlar earlier, so I've been working on that and estimating how much krill could be taken out of the sea every year, so on. So at the moment, I have retired and working mostly on polar history, as you heard my talk yesterday, was something about that. We heard also about the simplicity of Arctic or polar ecosystems and the complexity of rainforest. So my work at the moment is in the Amazon rainforest, actually, about restoration of rainforests. I don't know how much I should say about what I've learned today.
Maybe later.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
thanks. But let's you the last, please. Your turn. No.
My turn,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes. Your.
My turn.
Yes.
Okay.
The micro.
I have my-
Okay, you have.
Yes, I have. Thank you. As I introduced myself briefly at the beginning of my presentation, I am Vladislava. I'm an associate professor at Uppsala University. I'm an anthropologist. I originally come from Bulgaria, even though Sweden has been my academic home for decennia now, for more than 20 years. And since 2001, I have been involved in research with indigenous people, mostly in the European Arctic, but also in the Russian part of the Arctic in Siberia, and Sakhalin is the easternmost part I have been. My work can be situated at the intersections of indigenous empowerment, environmental governance, feminist study, always with focus also on nature conservation, sustainable development goals, and green transition. I think that's
Yes,
more or
please.
less.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from me and my interests with biogeography leading to historical geography. I was first involved seriously with polar regions a couple of years ago in 1977 with the British Antarctic Survey. That changed rather suddenly in 1982, and subsequently I've dealt with theory and practice in the Scott Polar Research Institute. Indeed, that's where I first met colleagues from Estonia in interesting circumstances. The question of who went where when, and perhaps even why, in the historical geography I started with the peri-Antarctic islands, what got where and so forth from the biology point of view. That was after South Georgia, then the other islands, and incidentally heading for the continent on the basis of the questions of sovereignty and diplomacy came into this, and hence, of course, the Antarctic Treaty. Coming north, then working with Scott Polar. By that time, my period in the Antarctic had made me useful, so I was more or less technical then, able to set up camps fairly effectively, mainly on Nordaustland and Svalbard. But further from there, if you consider the peri-Antarctic islands south, consider the Eurasian Arctic archipelagos, where you have Jan Mayen, Björnøya, Svalbard, and then all the Russian ones, Franz Josef, Novaya Zemlya, all of those places. Then came the amazing changes, 1991, when this became open. Before that, it was, you needed the Russian visas to come to Tallinn. 25 years of relative openness and cooperation, and we all know what happened only a few years ago with the Murmansk speech saying the zone of peace in the Arctic has rather changed on this basis. But my circumstances, I'm now theoretically quite retired. That has the huge advantage, nothing to do with administration. But I have the facilities and details of Scott Polar Research Institute, and hence the books, publications, and other things on the subjects which I've become interested in are continuing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Paet is being 10 years the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, and now 10 years the Member of the Parliament, is continuing there. And please introduce yourself and about the Arctic work in Europe, please.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm really glad that you're organizing this Arctic and Antarctic event here in Estonia. And yes, my name is Urmas Paet. At the moment, I'm Vice Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the European Parliament, and also Chairman of the Arctic Friendship Group in the European Parliament, which I founded myself during previous mandate, because I saw that also in the European Parliament, among my 700 plus colleagues, issues related to Arctic need to be better presented, and the awareness of all these processes over there should be, well, better known. I also have been twice in the European Parliament rapporteur of the EU Arctic policy reports, and I would say that during this mandate, which started last July, most probably there will be new, refreshed Arctic strategy of the European Union, also from the European Parliament, because last version comes from 2021, and as we all know, after February 22, when Russia started new wave of aggression against Ukraine, also a lot, especially from a geopolitics and security point of view, changed also in Arctic area, and unfortunately, I would say more to come in this sphere for sure. So this is my, well, background and relation also to Arctic. I would say that when I was foreign minister in Estonia here, then 15 years ago, I already officially proposed that Estonia should apply for the candidate status in Arctic Council. Well, I'm glad that finally Estonian government did it a few years ago, but still it took also here in Estonia years and years to make it clear why at all. Also from the state point of view, we should turn attention to Arctic developments. But finally, yes, we applied as country, as government, also this application to get candidate status or observer status. But because of course, all other political events, so far it is there. So that I would say that the European Union as such, and also Estonia, we put in these applications, but mainly because of course, opposition from Russia. So far it didn't happen, and at the moment, especially on the political level, of course, Arctic Council is not functioning. because of reasons which I already mentioned. You expect me have now longer monologue?
Yes,
or what is the plan?
You have time. It's an extra situation for you, or others are taking part in the conference. You are freshly coming, so that please.
Okay. Well, when I joined European Parliament 10 years ago, then actually one of the issues I also wanted more and more introduce in the Parliament was the same, which actually is then EU's, European Union strategy towards Arctic, because Arctic also, when we speak about geopolitics point of view, in this sense, is special area, because on the one hand, it is partly also EU territory. We have 3 member states, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark over there, plus 2 countries which are anyway very close to EU, Norway and Iceland. At the same time, this is the area where all, I would say, global big powers are present. Of course, as we all know, directly US, Russia, Europe, also Canada, but also China calls itself near Arctic country. And this is also well written down in important strategy documents in China. And during last years, we clearly see that China is entering into Arctic using options via Russia. They are making very strong cooperation in this regard. And, well, I have my doubts that the main goal why China, for instance, is interested in Arctic is science or environment or something like this. Of course, the reasons are different ones. And when I started in the European Parliament to raise the issues related to Arctic and telling to colleagues that, yes, well, we need a bit better picture and understanding what is going on there, which is the impact and so on, then first few years I got very strong resistance, especially from the European Commission, from the officials in the European Commission, but also from some Arctic member states. And the resistance was based on this, that, well, you should not talk, when we speak about Arctic, you should not talk about security, you should not talk about business interests, you should not talk about economic development. No, Arctic is science, Arctic is environment, Arctic is cool, peaceful place in the world, and it should remain like this. Well, of course, I didn't disagree. Of course, we all want that the Arctic is a place which is cool and peaceful, but unfortunately, it's not up to us, because at that time it already was very visible that, for instance, Russia started new, very massive and costly program to rebuild all the military network they used to have during Soviet times in Arctic area, to restore it and even build and invest more. And of course, the question is that why to make such a huge investments in Arctic for military infrastructure if you, well, just want to keep, well, Arctic nice and peaceful place? What is the point? And I remember one Kirkenes conference. They used to organize in Norway conferences in Kirkenes before February 22, and the last one was in February 22, where still lots of talk about how everybody is very friendly in Arctic area. There was excellent cooperation between Murmansk Oblast and Kirkenes area, and the conference finished, and one day later Russia once again started war against Ukraine. And as we now know, well, everything dramatically changed also in this area. First time in history, the full border between Finland and Russia is fully closed. Basically also the crossing point up north between Norway and Russia is also more or less closed. The cooperation also in most of the levels has stopped, and so on and so on. And of course, it was also visible that if you speak about climate changes and physical changes in Arctic, melting ice and so on, that it has clearly impact also to the interest and policies and potential conflicts between states. If there are new, options or possibilities for water roads or waterways, if there is again, after a very long time possible to have no ice routes, which Russians, together Chinese, as we know, are developing on the north coast of Russia, bringing together more Asia and the European side, the route which is 1/3 quicker and shorter than the classical trade route through southern seas. Of course, it all has impact. The better access to raw materials, to oil and gas, the better access also for military equipment in Arctic, that all it will have consequences and changes also, not situation just in Arctic, but on much larger scale. So that all these signs were there 10 years ago. And well, unfortunately, I would say again, as it is very human. Something really bad has to happen, and then only people realize that, well, we have to, do something or change our attitude. So that unfortunately, I would say that also the new wave of Russian war against Ukraine, 22, was needed so that people realized that, unfortunately also from geopolitical point of view, Arctic is nothing really, separate from the rest of global arena. And now we should, in this sense, of course, not to speak about this because everybody sees which are the real changes also in Arctic area. Also, the security picture changed in this sense. Clearly, we have now actually all European Arctic countries in NATO, for instance, after Finland and Sweden also joined, so that we also may speak that big part of Arctic is also now completely in direct interest of NATO, and so on and so on. But of course, as I understand also during this conference, you spoke a lot about scientific research and environment, and in this sense I fully agree, because this is also the basics and main reason why lots of other things are happening in Arctic, lots of not so good things. The reason is the same, the climate change, the melting of ice, the changes we have in, natural environment. And of course, if it continues like this and there are no real steps which have positive impact to these trends, then the more there will be, for instance, free water, the more there is access to new raw materials, new reserves of oil and gas, new transit routes, and it also, I would say, automatically means that also the potential of the conflict between countries who are present in Arctic, who have interests over there, jumps up. We already see it. If you look at huge military exercises which are happening in Arctic area, and so on and so on. So that that's why I think that yes, it's also important for European Union as such to have this whole picture and whole strategy, how we should behave, what we should do under all these tremendously quickly changing circumstances, and not forgetting that yes, the basics and the main trigger for lots of other also unwanted developments is coming from natural environment and all these changes over there. And I stop here my monologue with also one word. You spoke about energy. Of course, energy still is also very attractive thing in Arctic, and also potential for conflicts, because, of course, data is a bit different, but in average they say that, still around 1/3 or 30% of unused gas is still in Arctic area. And of course, the appetite is there, I would say this is one of the main reasons why China is so active together with Russians over there. But at the same time, also in Europe, there are lots of people who say that, for instance, Norway and Norwegian companies should stop their energy exploration and works in Arctic seas because there is certain risk for environment and so on and so on. But at the same time, European policymakers can do anything about Russian intentions, about US or Canadian intentions to do the same. So that I would say that, for instance, with such a just fragmented approach, we, once again, weaken Europe and European possibilities, because the more those others, especially, Russia and Chinese, well, can do what actually they want to do. And I'm absolutely sure that if you look at the ethics and morality and also technologies up there, Norwegian ones, I would say, are rather better than Chinese or Russian ones. So that in this sense, with every such an important step, emotions are always important, but also in case of Arctic and Arctic geopolitical changes and interest, I guess we also need a bit more this sober and adequate approach. So that, for instance, well, when Trump was president 5 years ago, he wanted to buy Greenland from Denmark. Well, we all were laughing about, but of course there were good reasons why he wanted to do it. It was not just about emotions. It was very pragmatic, well, calculation in this regard, although he forget, yes, that now we're on 21st century and most probably European countries are not selling their territories anymore as it used to be maybe 200 years before. Well, I stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's do the first round for the questions from the audience, and also we all can give the questions to Mr. Paet, if you have. It was a special lecture about the situation and how is the people thinking in Brussels. Yes. Okay, please. Let's start from there. Yes, please. Yep.
So, Martin Lira from Geological Survey of Estonia. So, I just a quick question to Mr. Paet. What is the situation at the moment in the European Parliament about the notions in Arctic? Are the other Parliament members, are they interested in Arctic issues? Is it a popular theme? Are everybody on the same page regarding the geopolitical situation and that the situation is getting worse? And so, what are our understanding of Arctic? Is it similar to the rest of the European Union?
Well, I guess that complete consensus we can find on the graveyard, and especially not in the European Parliament on any issue, including this one. As I started with this Arctic, also friendship group in Parliament, the reason was that for my taste, there was far too few interest. People didn't care because the tradition was that nothing happens in Arctic, It's cold, dark, there are no people, why we should, care about. Today, I guess situation in this sense is better, but unfortunately, again, because what I just explained, because of the, overall tragic events. So that people now realize that, yes, all this, conflict potential is much higher also in Arctic, and also the melting of ice and so on and so on. But still, I would say that it's not still yet there where it should be. I mean, the feeling that, there is huge potential of Europe in both, in positive ways, but unfortunately also in negative ways if important things will be mishandled. So that, yes, there is still space to maneuver. What is positive is that when I spoke about Arctic Council, of course, now unfortunately it is dysfunctional, but before 22, I would say that actually all or most of influential EU member states, also coming from Southern Europe, they all already were observers in Arctic Council. So that it means that at least on governmental level there is direct interest and also direct contact through this Arctic Council body. But yeah, last 2.5 years or now almost 3 years, this is dysfunctional. Although yes, on some expert level something happens, but in overall or political level, of course, nothing. And most probably you spoke here, but of course there are also inside this issue are of course bigger and minor conflicts also between the understandings, for instance, of members of parliament. One is that yes, we have around 200 MEPs out of 720 members who anyway like Russia. So whatever decisions we make to support Ukraine or to criticize Russia, they always abstain or vote against. And of course it also applies to the Arctic as well. And And then there are also issues, I guess you also touched during this conference here, what is the role of indigenous people, especially when we speak about Europe and European Union citizens in Finland or Sweden, and Greenland, of course, is a special case anyway. What is their approach? And it comes as a surprise for many MEPs that usually indigenous peoples and indigenous peoples organizations, when they come to the parliament or to the commission in Brussels, they are very, very critical against their own governments. They say that, well, their own governments, they don't care. And it comes as a surprise for many because the common understanding is that, well, if there is Nordic country, Arctic country, then they all, sort of together fighting for the same thing. But as we all know, the most emotional conflicts, they're very local ones. And in Arctic areas, also when we speak about Europe, there are also lots of indigenous conflicts in this area. And not even talking about the indigenous people's situation in Russia, for instance, where they simply, unfortunately, very quickly disappearing.
Thank you. Please.
I had largely the same question that you already answered to Martin, but I wanted to start the question is sort of how many members of that friendship club or Arctic
20.
Friendship Club? You have 20 out of 700?
720, yes. But if you look at the European Parliament structure, then we have friendship groups, we have intergroups, we have delegation, we have committees, whatever, So that in this sense, I guess that this 20 out of 720 is rather optimal.
If I may add a comment
Yes,
to this, is that, yes, I understand very many of these processes that you describe on a European level. For example, if I take Svalbard as an example here as well, there was in the beginning there was a lot of attitude is that we all friends here and we live in a small bubble because there is a Norwegian community settlement and there are Russian settlements and we always been friends and let's be friends even after the Ukraine war broke out. But that changed very quickly and I think the Norwegian government's attitude has changed. They have now, when 15 years ago Svalbard was almost like Wild West. I mean, yes, it was a Norwegian territory, but that Norwegian control, you hardly felt it there because it was rather free in that way. But after these geopolitical conflicts and situations in the world, now the situation has changed. There is a customs station established very quickly by Norwegian authorities. So there is, and the Russian residents are now registered in a Norwegian tax office to have an overview who is residing in Svalbard also from the Russian side and all so on and so forth. So my point is single country can react like Norway very rapidly to these changes. I think the European countries, there may be a lot more inertia and momentum to get these processes going.
Question.
Yes, I have a question. What kind of leverage does the EU actually have in the Arctic? Because if you look at the map, Sweden and Finland, they're technically Arctic countries, but they're landlocked. And when we talk about all these conflicting interests, it's mostly we're speaking about the, water. And Greenland, special case. So the EU really doesn't border the Arctic Ocean. So what kind of leverage do we have? Right now it sounds like it's almost like an interest group, like a hobby group at the parliament.
Yes, this group is friendship group, indeed. But of course there is official policy of the EU vis-à-vis Arctic, because this European Parliament, for instance, reports on Arctic policy or so-called European Commission's Arctic strategy. They are absolutely official EU documents and plans. Well, the
leverage.
Yes, it's different. Of course, there is direct one, because and the main tool is EU budget. In this sense, there are quite many infrastructural projects, energy projects, all other social, humanitarian projects, also scientific ones, which are going on in Arctic, which are fully or partly financed by different EU budget lines. Then there is, of course, legal yes, there are 3 countries who are members, but at the same time, well, Norway and Iceland are not full members of the EU, but they are, in this sense, very close to the European common market. They are parts of Schengen area, for instance, and it also means that they have lots of joint obligations from legal point of view, also what concerns the territories and what's going on in the territories. There is, of course, quite strong, I would say, diplomatic or political power behind, because when I spoke that, well, Russia is there and US is there and more China, then it's obvious that if you look from Europe's point of view, if there is Finland alone or Sweden alone or even Denmark alone, well, they don't have such a power. When the counterpart also in Arctic issues for those other big powers is European Union as a whole. And it also plays a role in security issues and the more in all other issues. So that I would say that these are concrete examples, but behind is, of course, the notion, how big or how powerful one or another player is. When we speak about military point of view, yes, there is NATO, but also majority of NATO members are also EU members. During last years, we witnessed very close also cooperation in field of defense between EU and NATO, so that this is also part of the game. So that maybe I would say that yes, this impact is in all these spheres, and without, I guess, presence of all Europe behind also our concrete member states who are in the area, their position and potential could be much weaker.
Kind of like China.
Sorry?
We're kind of like China near Arctic.
No, we are in Arctic because EU is in Arctic. Denmark, Finland, Sweden, they are in Arctic.
Vladislava, please. Wait a minute, please.
I have a question to Mr. Paet and also Professor Fridtjof Mehlum. And it can be experienced like a little bit challenging, but I strongly believe in deliberation and discussion, and I feel that we didn't have so much discussion during the conference. So
now we have.
Now we have. Yes, thank you. So moving, like, I've been involved in research in the Russian Arctic since 2001, and a lot of time I have spent in the most militarized area in the Kolla Peninsula, following reindeer herding. So that's where the Soviet and Russian nukes are. And I don't think anyone have had an illusion that Russia demilitarized. It's been involved all these years into kind of a continuous militarization, or at least resistance to demilitarization. And definitely it's built up starting since maybe 2010, even if not even earlier. Nevertheless, there have been this expectation that environmental cooperation for peace, inclusion and cooperation between indigenous peoples is kind of creating a platform for peaceful solution of issues and field for discussion. I don't have the experience, like moving through postdocs at Tromsø University, at Uppsala, also in Germany. I don't think that the position, at least among social scientists, have been one of naivety or kind of lack of pragmatic understanding of the utilization of resources. I think that the idea have been that it is a space and a platform for peaceful cooperation that can be used in cases of escalation. And I'm curious of your comment on that, if that's a kind of correct and more nuanced understanding. And also, my question then is, do you believe that kind of strong militarization of the European Arctic with the participation of all European countries and kind of strong industrialization and dehumanization of the area is going to be a solution to the kind of escalation that we are experiencing today, not only in Russia? Russia is an extreme case, but also in other Arctic countries.
To me?
Yeah.
To you and to,
Okay.
to Professor Fridtjof.
Yes, maybe others also
Yeah.
Everyone.
wanted to
Okay,
say.
if-
Yes, please. Yeah.
If I may start, then, well, my position is that unfortunately it is impossible to take out one big part of the world, like Arctic, and to think that there is completely different life, completely different relations between countries, completely different relations between the people as it is elsewhere, for instance, in Europe. If I look at, well, also practical developments during last few years in Arctic, well, it was not Europe, it was not Finland who started bringing illegal immigrants to northern sphere from very southern countries to up north and to push them over the border to Finland, to Norway, knowing very well that this is creating huge problems. It was big part of hybrid war of Russia against immediate neighbors in north, with whom they supposed to be, well, big friends and not looking at all other developments in the world. The same militarization of Arctic. Again, the question is why? Why Russia invested huge amount of finances to rebuild its military presence in Arctic? I guess that if you look at Russia, they have lots of other places to put money. Why they decided to create this one, this area? I would, in this sense, if you look at all this Putin's regime steps, then I guess the parallel with Nazi Germany is completely adequate. Would anyone think that although, yes, Nazis were bad, Hitler was bad, but we still continue cooperation in here or there? Or even, the war was over, and if, for instance, Hitler's government would continue in Nazi Germany, then everybody would think that now we go back as nothing happened. I guess that it's even not imaginable. And it is also the case with today's Putin's Russia. We see what happens with the places and areas where this kind of political regime sees and feels weakness. This was the reason why they attacked Ukraine, why they attacked Georgia before, and so on. So that's why, at least temporarily, also the counterbalance in Arctic areas is needed. Otherwise, if this kind of regime sees weaknesses, where anyway they have provoked also during more peaceful times. We all remember when they put the Russian flag to on the bottom of the sea on the North Pole, exactly. And it was the times when more or less there were no tensions in Arctic, but still they did it. So that in this regard, my answer to you, unfortunately, is that yes, the situation is so that we cannot, create completely different atmosphere or sphere for Arctic. So everything is too strongly linked to Earth and indigenous people, who Putin sent and still sends first to die in Ukraine. People from minorities, including the same indigenous peoples, because they have simply no voice even in Russian society.
I understood that it was a very good question, and then the other... Yes, please reflect.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I don't know if I have so much to add concerning the indigenous people here, but about the militarization of the Arctic. First of all, when it comes to Svalbard, it's supposed to be non-military. No, the treaty says that there should be no military actions there at all. But we know, for instance, that the Russian helicopter airport at Kapir, it was there was a base of military helicopters. You can see the difference between the civil and the military helicopters. The rotor is on the left side and on the right side. Yeah. So they were military. And you all know about this new modern air base they have now on Franz Josef Land. Why do they have that? And there has been a lot of talk about what, in a critical situation, how to get control over Svalbard. And of course, the best thing you can do is get control of the airport. Then you have control of the whole Svalbard. And for Russia, it's easy to get control of that because it's a longer distance to the Norwegian mainland than from, for instance, from Franz Josef Land. So it's difficult to tell exactly what the Russians want there, but at least much of the activities they're doing are related to military activities.
Yeah, please.
So I'm going to give another dimension to this story because there's no need to repeat of previous good ideas. So even if we don't realize it, so we are very much dependent on a Mother Earth. We are vitally dependent. So if we don't have resources, natural resources, we just die because we are part of nature. We are not separate of nature. So in that respect, in order to get a sustainable development in terms of ecosystems, I believe some channels should be maintained, even if we think it's sort of unethical. So for example, we have a fishery stocks, which we are sharing, and imagine what happens if, so we are managing from our sides and other parts, so we have zero understanding what's happening. So it's, but as it was said already a day ago, or was it today? No, it was yesterday, that actually we have these sorts of official channels, and these should be maintained, even if the regime is not the best we think. And then I also acknowledge that to kill relationships, that's easy. So you can do it within a minute, and then it's gone. To build up relationship, it depends on the culture. If you go to Japan, it might take generations. So maybe it's more easy in Europe. And then in order we are able to maintain a bit of relationships. So maybe in future, like in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, so we can start collaborating quicker, because when it comes to planet Earth or planet Ocean, actually, because you have more ocean than this land, then we don't have too much time left. So we have to act.
Okay, please.
May I broaden things a little bit, too, ladies and gentlemen? Thinking geographically, the Arctic does divide very well into the Eurasian Arctic and the North American Arctic. A lot of the problems, ourselves in the Eurasian Arctic, are very substantial. Think of the North American Arctic also, with the United States, Canada, and Denmark. And think of what might be happening in those circumstances. Northwest Passage, very minor as a waterway goes now. Last year had the maximum number of ships ever. It was a whole 41. The Panama Canal gets 20,000, and the Suez half of that. The Northeast Passage, likewise. There's traffic, but we don't know the numbers. These things are very rarely revealed now. It's some of the old days from that point of view. The stability and circumstances in those two aspects of the Arctic are so vastly different. And the militarization, the action, and to some extent the response mirror each other in that basis. To go even further and broader, think of the other polar end of things, the Antarctic. The treaty has worked very well. For many countries, the idea, to put it in the vernacular, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But now, I'm going to say Russia and China again, even damage to the Antarctic Treaty is coming from present circumstances. That broadens it to the entire Arctic and some of the South. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a more question in the audience. If it's actual now, please Okay. If no, let's go back to our conference. Maybe if we are trying to do some conclusions, yes, let's start from here. Okay, let's do it.
May I come back to the conference and change
Yes.
the subject again, ladies and gentlemen? The 40th anniversary book and the display in the Maritime Museum. One of the excellent things about this were the map in the front part, the back part, the end pages. The number of Estonians all round parts of Svalbard, all over the Antarctic, places have met and known people here, colleagues and otherwise. The efficiency, working in cooperation with other countries, has had things very well distributed, and those two maps tell a lot by just looking at the 2 pages. That, I think, brings us back to a 40th anniversary.
Okay, please.
My take and wish. Like coming from a small non-Arctic nation, I said I'm from Bulgaria. I have been personally questioned many times, including from Estonian colleague anthropologists, why I'm involved in Arctic research and have kind of spent my life and career on that. And I personally believe that the Arctic is a global concern. Most of the pollution, I had the numbers in my presentation, I didn't have the chance to show them, but most of the pollution in the Arctic is produced in other parts of the world. So the negative impact it has on local populations, it comes from us. Climate change is affecting severely the Arctic and other areas of the world. In addition to rights of kind of liberal rights and freedom to involve in whatever research and curiosity we want, I think that there is a very strong justification, and not only that, but a responsibility to pay attention to the Arctic and to do research there, and cooperation is definitely the key word. In addition to this, I would kind of express my wish at this anniversary, and as I said, of the polar crab reaching this honorable age. My wish is that on the basis of some shared historical experiences of domination, and also of the kind of acute situation we are now, and you mentioned indigenous people and their situation, and I just published something in German on kind of using the concept of ethnic and cultural genocide over indigenous people in the Russian North. I would strongly recommend that one of the directions of cooperation of Estonia is to become an advocate of cooperation and inclusion of indigenous knowledge and indigenous politicians into the debates of the Arctic. But also I would like to think that as scholars we have a mission toward doing our best to actually look for other solutions to this escalation rather than the destruction of the Arctic through kind of overexploitation of the resources, their unsustainable use, and through militarization, which is threatening to extinction indigenous people. Literally, the Russian case is a very good example here. Thank you.
Fridtjof,
Yeah,
about
thank you.
conference, conclusions, please.
Yeah. So I would like to focus on the natural sciences. That's my field. And during this conference, I think we've heard a lot of interesting things. We've heard a lot about emerging technologies, new tools that you can use. And I think that's important when you're working in remote areas. It's difficult to get, in situ sampling. So all these new sensors and new equipment is very useful, and apparently Estonian scientists have done a great job there in innovation. We also heard about modeling of systems, this digital twin things and new algorithms for, data mining and stuff like that. This is very important. We have also heard about species distribution modeling. Now you can model multiple species. Before you only could handle a species at a time. That could give us a lot of insight if you put in, the scenarios of changes in the environment. Then you can see how maybe the vegetation, the communities of animals will change or might change. We also heard about, the response, or the time between you detect something and you can do a response. And also when this can be translated into political or policy changes, that has to be shortened, that time span, and also the researchers need to be better to convey their results into your political actions. That's probably very tricky. Another thing that I noticed was with some very interesting new data about plant-plant interactions in relation to climate change. But if you look at the whole system, so the plants are eaten by animals, and there's a whole food chain. And if you have some changes in the climate changes, you might also disrupt, the sequence between the phenology, the timing when you have the peak growth in vegetation and when you have the peak number of animals and so on. And the second thing I would like to say, for instance, in the northern hemisphere, there's a big change in the water masses that probably other people here know more about. But for instance, in the fjords of Svalbard, have Atlantic water instead of the Arctic water, which have a very different flora and fauna, and predators that are dependent on prey, like plankton. They are now another food source than before, and can they handle this? And so we need more research on this, or if the system is going to be disrupted. So this is just some comments from me.
Okay, thank you. Jonne, please.
So I try to give a bit broader view, not to focus on my subject, because I very much agree what you tell, basically. But we tend to act in isolation. And with this, I'm not meaning that, for example, anthropologist is not meeting a marine biologist, but more like that science is not meeting policymakers, and when we have lots of entrepreneurs who don't know about the policy or science, and so you have this disconnection. And then it is absolutely important to bring all these different disciplines together. And this can be super challenging because you never know who are your presenters. So if they are focusing deeply in their subject, other people find it very boring because they don't understand it. But if they are too generic, it becomes simplistic. So it's not really telling anything about the subject. But if this is done in a good way, as it was done in this conference, that's a big success story. So thank you again, being here and contributing.
Riko, please.
Well, for me, well, first of all, I mean, I'm truly impressed by this conferences. I've been away from the Estonian research scene for a while, working abroad, but having seen how much good polar research is being done in Estonia is truly inspiring, and how diverse it is. And I completely echo what the previous fellow panelists have already said, so I'm not going to repeat that. But I think that, well, of course, everything is linked, and having worked for a long time for Svalbard, everything is politics, even research. So you start doing it, it's very quickly you get into politics. And ultimately, I agree, it's all about resources. So it's oftentimes the research and science gets used to disguise the true ambitions, which is all about resources. And that's why the interest in the Arctic has sort of kicked up. And there are big nations, hungry nations for resources, are moving into the Arctic. And us as a scientists, and it is important to keep these communication channels open, even if it is on a personal level when the official channels, when the official diplomacy breaks down and we end up sort of, ultimately who has bigger guns has the resources. That's how it is. We should try to avoid it, but nevertheless, we live in a world that is hungry for energy, hungry for resources, everything depends on it, and we are exploiting them as there is no tomorrow. So we sooner or later we will wake up, or the planet Earth will wake us up. So that's the, yeah, you can put me in a pessimist box if you want to, but that's how I see things at the moment. But to come back to the conference is that I think really Estonia has a lot of potential in Arctic research if we bring this under the same umbrella. And yes, if you have more room in your friendship club, we can establish another friendship club here as under the Estonian Polar Club, for instance, and become active in more in this way and bring these different branches of Arctic research, because it's we need to be reminded how diverse it is and how linked everything is that yesterday we talked a little bit about, and Kersti Karjula reminded that, well, maybe scientists do not doing enough informing the public. Well, we kind of do, but then again, it's everybody does it from their own perspective. But these are complex issues, and everything is linked together. So it's we cannot make these messages too simplistic either. So it's and we have to understand that, well, it's we cannot use the climate as an excuse, for instance, for this overextensive use of natural resources to like, I just have to say this example here out loud is when our Estonian Agency for Forest Management had a sort of a slogan for a while is that the harvester operator is a climate hero. Jesus Christ, we really got the knickers in twist here. This is, it couldn't be further from truth. Clear-cutting forest does not fix the climate. It's quite the opposite, and we have to. And then what we saw from the presentations today is we are part of the ecosystem. We have to live with it, but our footprint is way too large. I mean, the other species are dying out. The biodiversity is disappearing because of what we do on this planet, and we have to take step back and try to be more conservative in this way and live as part of the ecosystem, not as a user of this ecosystem. Otherwise, it will end sooner or later. Thank you.
Thank you. Some remarks from audience. If no, we have, the time is running very, very quickly. Maybe the last question is about the future. We have spoken about the future, so or so, but there is two things of my mind. One is scientific part, and the other is, let's say, so political. Maybe most important for us here in the conference is scientific part, but nevertheless, there is impossible to talk about the future if we are not talking about the policy situation and all the situation in the northern part of the earth. So that who wants to say some? Yes, please. Yeah, let's. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that maybe it's better to do so that everyone can quickly say some words, because the time is running. Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Futures. So
yes.
now I tried to be a scientist, because I was I've been discussing two broader things. So being a scientist, among us also resource is very much limiting, and not necessarily like money, but time, because we lack a lot of time to make good choices, and then a lot of people are talking about data, but I would like to add another dimension: data and knowledge, because data is just a number, knowledge is a description of numbers. So we need, as a scientist, to develop better and more efficient technologies, how, with the limited resources, to extract different sort of information, and then to try to collaborate with all these different disciplines to develop nice models, sort of scenario models, that can be used to predict different types of futures. For example, we have a scenario: militarization, demilitarization, colonization, decolonization, all those things, along with natural ecosystems. And then these should be communicated very easily to policymakers, like a digital twin. I had a talk earlier this day, and then should be sort of web-based, simple, fast, and so on. I know it's sort of ideal thing, but it's doable within a few years to come. So I think that can be a very good message from the science part, because then policymakers can use it as a sort of bulletproof vest, because they know that their decisions have been made based on a best available science, but they still considered multiple scenarios. And so they picked up those who are giving the economical profits, because we can avoid it. And at the same time, we are saving the nature as much as we can, maybe even restoring. Thank you.
Riko, you shall add something.
I can add, I can continue. I agree very much. I mean, the future of if we talk now about the research and as I said, my field is a seafloor mapping a lot. I've been in the editorial committee of the IPCA, the International Bathymetric Chart of Arctic Ocean, for over 2 decades, and there is another big seafloor mapping initiative, Seabed 2030, that has an ambition to map the entire seafloor of the entire planet by 2030. With modern methods, and that is defined as having a bathymetric grid 100 by 100 meter resolution. And for the Arctic Ocean, we just released its version 5 with that resolution, and actually backed up by real data is only 25% of it. So the rest is coming from other indirect methods. It's far from the truth and from the resolution we actually need. And what we actually need for, let's say, sea-floor mining and all these resource exploitation that will come sooner or later. And it is very important to have these things, these agreements, the data-based, science-based agreements in place before we move in and start exploiting them. Because if we do that, otherwise we will destroy the ecosystems, we will destroy the planet as we know it. So it's and the future is very much in technology. I mean, we see that in warfare, we see that in research, all these unmanned or uncrewed platforms, sensors, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, pattern recognitions. These are the keywords that will define the future research. Thank you.
Thank you. Fridtjof, about the future, some words, please.
Well, I totally agree with what the last speaker was saying. So, but I think in addition to that, we are moving in the right direction. We might need some more money, of course, but we need international cooperation. Yesterday we talked about the next polar year, which could be, it's only 8 years from now. And we have some experiences from the previous polar year, which was very positive, I think. But it also learned us that you need to plan in advance for several years to get the funding. But it's also important that, the international organizations that we have are working well. And at the moment there is, I'm not sure what's going to happen. But all the bodies that are dealing with this, like SCAR and IASC and others, and has to be fully operating in order to achieve this. But I think that all countries, and especially also the EU, should start already now to think about how it's going to fund the next international polar year, or polar decade, as it was talking about also. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Paet, shall you say something? We have, you can see the watch is there. We have altogether 8 minutes, but
no worries.
Yes.
In Parliament, we have 1 minute maximum in speech time.
Okay. Maybe 3 minutes. It's
okay.
Good.
Well, from one Arctic country, from Finland, filmmaker Aki Kaurismäki recently said about the future, well, that there is no reason to be pessimist as there is no hope. So that in this regard, everything seems very easy. Well, on more serious note, although this was, I guess, quite serious, I guess that in the future, when we speak about Arctic, then I absolutely agree what Professor Noormets said, that it is very important that science people, politicians, also business people, they have to be much more together in this regard, what to decide, how to handle all this very quickly changing situation with Arctic, because impact is global, impact is huge, but still, for my taste, it's a little bit still too much so that, well, scientists are there having their own conferences and discussions, politicians only mostly based on emotions do something, and business people, of course, they look at their profits. And it's not enough, the frequency, how often they, in this sense, get together and somehow there is, to say, real discussion between these branches. For Arctic, I see another risk coming. Because of all this, well, climate change is what we already see, is that northern areas are more and more popular for regular tourism, because it's simply too hot in southern countries. So that already, I guess, last summer and a year ago, we saw that even during summertime, not only in winter, but also summertime, there are more and more tourists coming to the Northern Europe, including Arctic. And of course, also all this cruise ships issue, if there are more free waters and so on and so on. So that I see actually that there is another risk for Arctic approaching when those masses of tourists change direction where they go for 1 week or 2 week packages, because simply of climate change. So that, and it's again so that it's, I guess it's better to be prepared than again when already something, well, bad happens, deal with consequences. But yeah, lots of things, at least in foreseeable future, will depend what is the situation with European security, and as this war, Russian war against Ukraine, killed lots of cooperation and contacts, so that the sooner this ends, the sooner this regime ends in Russia, the better is hope that we can restore this cooperation also what concern Arctic and including indigenous people in the area.
Thank you. Vladislava, please.
I have to say that I fully agree with the previous speakers, and I think that science, including social science that I represent, should communicate to politicians and to businessmen and to kind of economic actors. But nevertheless, as an anthropologist and also part of my research profile, and also as a teacher, I teach courses on justice and different aspects of justice, like environmental justice, social justice, and so on. I also want to speak for the people. And I want to say that people are the majority, and politicians are accountable to people, and they are also electable.
Politicians are people as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with that, but not everyone, like the majority of us are not politicians, but politicians are accountable and they're also re-electable, right? So in this sense,
in some countries only.
That's where I'm coming, exactly. They should be in an ideal world, they should be. So in this sense, I think education, and here I mean education as part of our job, because I believe most of us are also teachers in one way or another, but also kind of opening up for more popular writing in relation to social justice, to rights, can contribute to kind of solving some of the issues we are talking about, and is of ultimate importance, and it is part of our role as scientists, and also should be done in cooperation between different disciplines, because here we did not address a lot of the problems that actually the world is facing today, which is dictatorships, which is corruption, which is the power of political doctrines that are not so much subjected to humanitarian rights and justice. So this is something that I see also as our job.
Thank you. Robert, please.
So very briefly, the technology, I think, is extremely important. The population, indigenous and otherwise, about 80% of the population of the Arctic isn't indigenous. The people who are there are going to feel much of the effects. And we've had very much a look around of the different regions, north and south. It was a brilliant collection and very assorted.
That's it. Okay, from my side, I can only repeat, of my mind, the most important is energy, and two parts. One, how to get more energy for the people, and the other, how to manage with this energy that we have too much in our planet now. That's the question of my mind. And you see, time is over. What I can to say in very, very conclusion, of my mind, if I said yesterday, not so bad, maybe today I can say that it was rather okay. So that thank you for all panelists, thank you audience, and our conference is closed now. Thank you.
Can I have a 10-second positive note? Finalizing this, because we still have a few seconds left.
Yes, sure.
Good. So the positive note is that we all believing that we are destroying entire planet Earth. But eventually, if we continue like this way, humans get killed. Some species survive, no worries.
That's
With this happy note.
with this happy note.
And we have a complete agreements because we're all in graveyards, so it's perfect.
Aita, thank you.